He walked through the front door at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I was sitting on the couch, staring at the clock like I had been doing every night for the past 3 months, waiting, hoping, praying that maybe tonight would be the night he would come home. And when I heard the key turn in the lock, when I heard the door open, when I saw Marcus standing there in the doorway, my first reaction wasn't relief or joy or even anger. It was complete and total shock, because Marcus was holding a car seat, and in that car seat was a baby. A tiny sleeping baby wrapped in a pink blanket, and Marcus looked at me, standing there frozen in my bathrobe, with my mouth open, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to process what I was seeing. And he said, in a voice that was shaking, that was barely above a whisper, "Lorraine, I can explain." And those 3 words, those simple 3 words, shattered whatever small hope I had been holding on to, shattered my confusion, and replaced it with a cold, hard fury. And I said, my voice rising, my hands starting to shake, "Explain what, Marcus, explain. Where the hell you've been for 3 months. Explain why you didn't answer a single one of my hundreds of phone calls. Explain why you didn't respond to any of my text messages. Explain why you let me think you were dead. Explain why I had to file a missing persons report. Explain why the police searched for you for weeks and found nothing. Explain why your car was found abandoned on the highway. Explain why your credit cards haven't been used. Explain why you just vanished into thin air like you never existed. Like our 28 years of marriage meant nothing, and most of all, Marcus, most of all, explain whose baby that is, because it sure as hell isn't Minnie. Name is Lorraine Marie Washington. I'm 53 years old, and I have been a registered nurse at Detroit General Hospital for 30 years. I have seen a lot in those 30 years, seen life and death, seen tragedy and triumph, seen people at their absolute best and their absolute worst, but nothing in all those years of working in emergency rooms, seeing gunshot wounds, seeing car accidents, seeing overdoses, seeing families torn apart by grief, nothing prepared me for the moment. My husband of 28 years walked back into our house after disappearing without a trace for 3 months, carrying a baby that wasn't mine, and what I discovered over the days and weeks that followed. About where Marcus had been, what he had been doing, who he had been with, why he had left me in the dark for 91 days, thinking I was a widow, would be more devastating, more complicated, more heartbreaking than anything I had ever experienced. And the choice I would eventually have to make about whether to forgive him, whether to stay married to him, whether to help him raise another woman's child, whether to rebuild a marriage that had been completely destroyed by lies and betrayal and secrets. That choice would define who I was, would test everything I believed about love and forgiveness, and family would force me to confront the deepest parts of myself and ultimately would change my life in ways I never could have imagined. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the baby, before the disappearance, before the betrayal, before everything fell apart, and show you who we were, who Marcus and I were before all of this happened, because you need to understand that we weren't some couple who was already having problems. We weren't on the verge of divorce. We weren't living separate lives. We were solid. We were happy. We were best friends. We were partners in every sense of the word, or at least that's what I thought. That's what I believed until the moment he walked through that door with a baby and proved that I didn't know him at all, that I didn't know what he was capable of, that I didn't know anything. Marcus and I met in 1995 when we were both 25 years old. We were both working at Detroit General Hospital. Him as a first-year surgical resident, fresh out of medical school, me as a new nurse just starting my career. And we were both young and ambitious, and full of dreams about the future, about who we would become, about what we would accomplish, and I noticed him right away. Because everyone noticed Marcus Washington. He was 6'3", with the kind of presence that made people pay attention. When he walked into a room, he was handsome, with deep brown skin and dark eyes, and a smile that could light up an entire floor. And he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The kind of doctor who could diagnose complex cases that stumped everyone else, who could perform surgeries that other residents struggled with, who was destined for greatness. And somehow, someway, he noticed me too. We started dating within a month of meeting, fell in love within 3 months, got engaged after 6 months, married after a year, and everyone said we were moving too fast. Said we barely knew each other, said we should wait. But we didn't want to wait. Didn't see the point in waiting. Because when you know, you know. And we knew we were meant to be together. We're meant to build a life together. We're meant to grow old together. And for those first few years, we were blissfully happy. We worked hard at our jobs. Marcus becoming one of the best young surgeons in Detroit. Me working my way up from floor nurse to charge nurse to eventually nurse manager. We bought our first house, a small starter home in a decent neighborhood. We took trips when we could afford them, spent weekends exploring Michigan, spent evenings cooking dinner together and talking about our day, talking about our dreams, and one of those dreams. One of the biggest dreams we shared was having children. We both wanted a big family, wanted 4 or 5 kids, wanted a house full of noise and laughter and chaos, wanted to be parents more than we wanted almost anything else. And we started trying right away, started trying to get pregnant as soon as we got married. And at first it was fun, it was exciting every month, thinking this might be the month, this might be when we finally start our family. But month after month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. And we told ourselves it was fine. It was normal. It takes time to get pregnant. There's no rush. We're still young. We have plenty of time. But a year turned into 2 years. 2 years turned into 3 years. And we started to worry, started to wonder if something was wrong, started to see doctors, started to get tests. And that's when we discovered that I had endometriosis, severe endometriosis, that had been silently destroying my reproductive system for years. And the doctors said I could still get pregnant. It was just going to be harder, was going to require treatments, was going to require time and patience and money. Lots and lots of money. So we started down the road of fertility treatments, started with the less invasive options like Clomid and timed intercourse. And when that didn't work, we moved on to IUI. And when that didn't work, we moved on to IVF. And we went through 3 rounds of IVF, spending thousands of dollars that we didn't really have, going into debt, maxing out credit cards, taking out loans, all for a chance at having a baby. And each round was brutal, emotionally brutal, physically brutal. The hormone injections that made me sick and moody, the procedures that were invasive and painful, the waiting, the hoping, the 2-week wait between transfer and testing where you're too afraid to hope but can't help hoping anyway. And then the disappointment, the crushing, soul-destroying disappointment when the test comes back negative. When you're not pregnant, when another round has failed, when you've spent all that money and put your body through hell for nothing. And we didn't just fail to get pregnant. We also had to deal with miscarriages, had to deal with getting pregnant, only to lose the baby a few weeks later. And that was somehow even worse than not getting pregnant at all, because it felt like hope was being dangled in front of us, only to be ripped away, felt like we were being punished for wanting something. So badly felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke on us. And after the 3rd miscarriage, after the 3rd time of seeing that positive pregnancy test and letting ourselves believe, and then a few weeks later seeing blood and knowing it was over, I broke. I completely broke down. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't go to work, couldn't function. And Marcus, he was my rock during that time. He held me while I cried. He told me it was going to be okay. He said we would try again, would keep trying, would do whatever it took. And we did. We kept trying, kept putting ourselves through the hell of fertility treatments, kept hoping that maybe this time would be different. But after 5 years, after countless treatments, after spending over $60,000, after 4 miscarriages, we had to face reality, had to accept that biological children were probably not in our future. And it was Marcus who said we should stop, who said we were destroying ourselves, chasing something that might never happen, who said we needed to let go of this dream and find a different path forward. And I was angry at first. was furious that he wanted to give up, wanted to stop trying, because to me, stopping meant accepting failure, meant admitting defeat, meant mourning. Not just the babies we had lost, but all the babies we would never have, and I wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready to let go. But Marcus, he was calm. He was rational. He said, "Lorraine, we've been trying for 5 years. We've been through hell and back. We've put our lives on hold. We've gone into massive debt. And we still don't have a baby. And more importantly, you're not okay. I'm not okay. Our marriage is suffering. Our mental health is suffering. Our physical health is suffering. And we can't keep doing this. We just can't." And he said, there are other options. Said we could adopt. Said we could foster. Said we could find other ways to be parents. Said we could build a family that didn't involve pregnancy, didn't involve putting our bodies through more trauma. And eventually I agreed. Eventually I accepted that he was right, that we needed to stop the fertility treatments, needed to give ourselves time to heal, needed to figure out what came next. So we stopped. We took a break from trying to have kids, and we focused on other things, focused on our careers, focused on our marriage, focused on rebuilding what the years of infertility had damaged, and we talked about adoption, talked about how we could become parents without pregnancy, talked about the process, about the timeline, about what it would take, and Marcus seemed interested, seemed open to the idea, seemed like he wanted to move forward with it, but then something changed, something shifted. I would bring up adoption and he would change the subject, would say maybe later, would say, we should wait a bit. Longer would say, we should make sure we're really ready. And I didn't push him, didn't want to pressure him. Thought he just needed more time to process, to heal from the trauma of everything we had been through. But months turned into years, and Marcus never seemed ready, never seemed interested, never brought it up on his own. And slowly I started to realize that maybe he didn't want to adopt that. Maybe he had made peace with being childless, that maybe he was okay with it just being the two of us, and I tried to make peace with that too. Tried to accept our reality, tried to build a life that was full and meaningful even without children. And on the surface, we did that. We built a good life. We both had successful careers. Marcus became one of the top surgeons in Detroit, was recruited by multiple hospitals, was making excellent money. Me as nurse manager was doing well too, was respected in my field, was making good money, and we used that money to build a comfortable life. We bought a beautiful house in Palmer Woods, a historic neighborhood with big old homes and tree-lined streets. We decorated it with care, with art and nice furniture, and all the things we had dreamed about having. We traveled, went to Jamaica, went to Ghana, went to Paris, went all the places we had always wanted to see. We had a close group of friends, couples we had known for years, who we saw regularly, who we went out with, who we hosted dinner parties for. We were active in our church. I sang in the choir. Marcus was a deacon. We volunteered. We gave back to our community. We had what from the outside looked like a perfect life. Looked like. We had it all, looked like we were happy and successful and blessed. But there was always this absence, this missing piece, this room in our house that we had planned to be a nursery, that we had instead turned into a home office. But that still felt empty, still felt like a reminder of what we didn't have, and I would sometimes catch Marcus standing in that room just staring at the walls, looking so sad, so lost, and I would ask him what's wrong, and he would always say nothing. I'm fine, just tired from work, and I would accept that answer, would believe him, would think that he was coping the same way I was with good days and bad days, but mostly okay, mostly adjusted to our childless life. But I was wrong. I was so completely wrong. Because Marcus was not okay, was not adjusted, was silently suffering in ways I didn't understand, didn't see, couldn't have imagined. And that suffering, that grief, that unfulfilled longing for a child would lead him to make choices that would destroy everything we had built, would shatter our marriage, would bring us to the brink of losing each other forever. I didn't see it coming, didn't see any warning signs, didn't notice that anything was wrong. until it was way too late. And maybe that makes me a bad wife, makes me oblivious, makes me someone who should have known, should have seen, should have paid more attention. But I didn't. I trusted Marcus. Trusted that he would tell me if something was wrong. Trusted that after 28 years of marriage, we knew each other well enough that there were no secrets, no lies, no parts of ourselves we kept hidden from each other. But I was wrong about that too, was naive about that too, because Marcus was keeping secrets, was keeping the biggest secret imaginable, was living a double life that I knew nothing about. And when that secret finally came crashing into our living room in the form of a 3-month-old baby girl, it didn't just destroy my trust in him, it destroyed my understanding of reality, destroyed my belief that I knew the man I had married, destroyed everything I thought was true about our life together. The changes started about 4 years before Marcus disappeared. Started subtle, started small. Started in ways that I noticed but didn't think were significant, didn't think were cause for concern. Marcus started working longer hours, started staying late at the hospital, started coming home exhausted and distracted, and when I would ask him about his day, he would give vague answers, would say it was busy, would say there were complicated cases, would say he was tired and just wanted to relax, and I understood that being a surgeon was demanding, was stressful, required long hours and complete focus, so I didn't question it, didn't push, didn't think anything was wrong. And then he started taking trips, started going to medical conferences, started saying he needed to stay current on new procedures, needed to network, needed to present his research. And again, I didn't question. It didn't think it was unusual because doctors go to conferences all the time. It's part of the job. It's expected. It's normal. And Marcus had been doing it for years, had always gone to a few conferences a year. So when he said he was going to Atlanta for a week for a surgical conference, I said, "Okay, have a good trip. Be safe. I love you." And I thought nothing of it, had no reason to suspect that this trip would be different, that this trip would change everything, that this trip would be where my husband met another woman and made the choice to betray me, to destroy our marriage, to risk everything we had built together. Marcus came back from that Atlanta conference different, came back quiet, came back distant, came back distracted in a way that felt new, felt concerning. And I asked him multiple times if something had happened, if something was wrong, and he would say no. Everything's fine. I'm just tired from the trip, and I believed him, because why wouldn't I? Because in 27 years, Marcus had never given me a reason not to trust him, had never lied. To me, as far as I knew, had never even looked at another woman, had been faithful and devoted and committed to our marriage. And I had no reason to think that had changed. But it had changed. Everything had changed during that trip to Atlanta, and I just didn't know. It didn't suspect, wouldn't find out for years that the man I trusted completely had betrayed me. In the worst possible way, had slept with another woman, had started something that would eventually lead to a child, that would eventually lead to him leaving me for 3 months, that would eventually lead to everything falling apart. And for 3 years, I didn't know, didn't suspect, lived my life, thinking everything was fine, thinking our marriage was solid, thinking Marcus was the same faithful husband he had always been. And during those 3 years he was living with this secret, was carrying this guilt, was hiding the fact that there was another woman out there, a woman he had slept with, a woman he had made a terrible mistake, with a woman who would eventually come back into his life and destroy everything. And then 8 months before Marcus disappeared, he started acting strange, stranger than before, started getting phone calls that he would take in another room, started texting, constantly started guarding his phone like it contained state secrets. And I asked him about it, asked him what was going on, asked him if something was wrong, and he said, "It's just work." Said there's a complicated patient case, said he's consulting with other doctors from around the country, said it's nothing to worry about, and I accepted that answer, accepted his explanation because I trusted him, because after 28 years of marriage, you don't expect your husband to lie to your face. You don't expect your husband to be hiding something massive. You don't expect your husband to be in contact with another woman, with a woman who was pregnant with his child. But that's exactly what was happening. That's exactly what Marcus was hiding for 8 months while I went about my life, while I worked my shifts at the hospital, while I planned our 30th anniversary celebration that was coming up, while I lived in blissful ignorance. Marcus was dealing with this other woman, was dealing with the fact that she was pregnant, was dealing with the reality that he was going to be a father, was dealing with the guilt and the fear and the knowledge that his lie was about to explode, was about to destroy everything. And he didn't tell me, didn't warn me, didn't give me any indication that our lives were about to change forever, just kept the secret, kept lying, kept pretending everything was fine, while making plans to deal with this situation without me ever finding out. And then one morning in late March on a Wednesday morning that started like any other normal morning, Marcus got up at 6 a.m. like he always did, took a shower, got dressed in his scrubs, kissed me goodbye, and said, "I have a full day of surgeries today. I'll be home late. Don't wait up." And I said, "Okay, be safe. I love you." And he said, "I love you too, Lorraine." And he walked out the door, and I got up and got ready for my own shift at the hospital. And I had no idea, I had no clue, I had no sense that anything was wrong, that this was the last normal morning we would ever have, that Marcus was about to disappear, that my life was about to become a nightmare, that I wouldn't see my husband again for 3 months. I went to work that day, had a normal shift, dealt with the usual parade of patients with emergencies, with injuries, with illnesses, came home that evening around 7 p.m. expecting Marcus to be gone, expecting him to be at the hospital late like he said he would be. But when it got to be 10 p.m. and he still wasn't home, I started to worry, started calling his cell phone, started getting voicemail, started texting him, asking where he was, asking if he was okay, and getting no response. And by midnight, I was panicking, was calling the hospital, asking if Dr. Washington was still there. And they said, "No, he never came in today. He called in sick this morning." And I said, "What do you mean? He called in sick?" He told me he had surgeries all day, and they said, "No, ma'am. He called at 7 a.m. and said he wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be in." And I stood there in our kitchen holding the phone, feeling confused, feeling scared, because Marcus never called in sick. Marcus loved his job, was dedicated to his patients, would show up even when he was genuinely sick. So why would he call in sick when he told me he was going to work? Where was he if he wasn't at the hospital? Why was his phone off? Why wasn't he answering? I called his brother Devin, called his best friend, James, called everyone I could think of, and no one had heard from him. No one had seen him. No one knew where he was. And by 2 a.m., I knew something was seriously wrong. Knew this wasn't just Marcus. Losing track of time, knew this wasn't him. Deciding to go somewhere without telling me, knew something bad had happened. So I called the police, filed a missing persons report, and the officer who took my call said, "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but he's only been missing for a few hours. Most adults who go missing turn up within 24 hours. He probably just needed some space. Probably just went somewhere to clear his head." And I said, "No, you don't understand. My husband doesn't do this. He wouldn't just leave without telling me something is wrong, something happened. Please, you have to find him." And the officer said, "We'll do what we can, ma'am. We'll keep an eye out. But there's not much we can do until he's been missing for at least 24 hours. Call us back tomorrow if you still haven't heard from him." I waited. I sat in our living room staring at the door, waiting for Marcus to walk through, waiting for him to have some reasonable explanation for where he had been, waiting for this nightmare to be over. But he didn't come home, didn't call, didn't text. And when 24 hours had passed, when it was clear this wasn't just him needing space, wasn't just some misunderstanding, I called the police again. And this time they took me seriously. This time they opened an official investigation, started asking questions about Marcus, about our marriage, about whether we had been having problems, about whether he had any reason to leave, about whether he might have been suicidal or might have been involved in anything illegal. And I answered all their questions. Told them no, we weren't having problems. Told them yes, our marriage was good. Told them no, he wouldn't hurt himself. Told them no. There was nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, nothing that would explain why he would just vanish. And they searched, they really searched. They checked his credit cards, found no activity. They checked his bank accounts, found no withdrawals. They checked security. Cameras at the hospital found footage of him arriving that morning at 6:30 a.m. and then leaving 15 minutes later, getting into his car and driving away. They tracked his route using traffic cameras and found that he had driven to a rest stop on I-75 about 50 miles north of Detroit. And that's where the trail ended. That's where they found his car abandoned in the parking lot, keys still in the ignition, wallet and phone on the front seat. No sign of Marcus, no indication of where. He had gone no clues about what had happened, and the police said, "This is very unusual, ma'am. Most people who disappear leave some kind of trail. Use their credit cards, make phone calls, contact someone, but your husband seems to have just vanished. And there are a few possibilities here. Either something happened to him, either he was the victim of foul play, either he met with an accident, or either he left voluntarily. Either he's hiding, either he doesn't want to be found." And I couldn't accept. That couldn't believe that Marcus would just leave, wouldn't believe that he would abandon me without explanation. So I clung to the hope that something had happened to him, that he was hurt somewhere, that he needed help, that he would be found and brought home. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into a month, and there was no sign of Marcus, no body was found, no evidence of foul play, no ransom demand, no nothing, just complete and total silence. And I had to face the possibility that maybe Marcus had left voluntarily. Maybe he had chosen to disappear. Maybe there was something in his life, something he was hiding, that had made him run, and that possibility. That thought was almost worse than thinking he was dead, because at least, if he was dead, I could grieve, could have closure, could eventually move on. But if he had left, if he had chosen to abandon our marriage, then everything I thought I knew about him, about us, about our 28 years together, was a lie, was built on deception, was meaningless, and I couldn't accept that, couldn't process that. So I chose to believe he was hurt, chose to believe he needed help, chose to believe he would come home once he was found. But he wasn't found. The police investigation went cold after 6 weeks. They said there was nothing more they could do, said they would keep the case open, said they would follow up on any leads that came in, but they weren't actively searching anymore, weren't holding out much hope, weren't expecting to find Marcus alive, and I had to learn to live in this horrible limbo, this space between grief and hope, this existence where I didn't know if I was a wife or a widow, didn't know if I should keep waiting or move on, didn't know anything. And it was torture, absolute torture, worse than if Marcus had died, because at least death has finality, has rituals, has a process for grieving, but this absence, this not knowing, left me frozen, left me unable to process, unable to heal, unable to do anything but exist in a fog of confusion and pain. And my sister Denise, God bless her, she tried to help. She moved in with me for the first month, stayed with me, made sure I ate, made sure I got out of bed, made sure I didn't completely fall apart. But even she eventually had to go back to her own life, had to go back to her own family, and I was left alone in our house, surrounded by Marcus's things, his clothes still in the closet, his toothbrush still in the bathroom, his coffee mug still on the counter from that last morning, and I didn't know what to do with any of it, didn't know if I should pack it away or leave it, didn't know if I should give up hope or keep believing, didn't know how to move forward when I didn't know if my husband was dead or alive. And people tried to be supportive, tried to be there for me, but they didn't know what to say, didn't know how to help, didn't know whether to treat me like a widow or like a woman whose husband had abandoned her. And I could see the questions in their eyes, could see them wondering if Marcus had left me, could see them speculating about what I might have done to drive him away. And it was humiliating, was degrading, was adding insult to injury, because Not only was I dealing with Marcus being gone, I was also dealing with people judging me, wondering about me, treating me like either a victim to be pitied or a wife who had somehow failed to keep her husband happy, and I hated it, hated all of it. Hated not knowing, hated the speculation, hated the pity, hated being in this limbo, hated my life, hated that Marcus had done this to me, had put me in this position, whether intentionally or not. And then 3 months after he disappeared, 3 months of agony, 3 months of not knowing, 3 months of slowly going insane with grief and confusion. I was sitting on the couch watching television. Not really watching, just staring at the screen. Because that's all I did. Most nights just existed, just tried to pass the time until I could go to bed and maybe sleep for a few hours before waking up to another day of this nightmare. And I heard a car door close outside. Heard footsteps on the walkway leading to our front door, heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock, and my heart stopped, completely stopped, because I knew that sound knew, those footsteps knew what it meant. And the door opened slowly, and Marcus walked in. And he was carrying something. He was carrying a baby carrier with a sleeping infant inside. And we stood there frozen, staring at each other, him looking terrified, looking guilty, looking like he wanted to run, looking like he knew what was coming. And me looking shocked, looking confused, looking at him and at the baby, and not understanding, not processing, not believing what I was seeing. Because this couldn't be real, couldn't be happening, couldn't be Marcus standing in my living room with a baby after 3 months of being gone. And I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My brain couldn't form. Words couldn't make sense of what was happening, couldn't connect the dots. And finally Marcus spoke. His voice shaking his hands, trembling as he set the baby carrier down on our living room floor and said Lorraine, and just hearing him say my name, just hearing his voice after 3 months of silence, broke something inside me, broke the shock that was holding me frozen, and I found my voice, found my anger, found every emotion I had been suppressing for 3 months, and I screamed at him. I screamed, "Where have you been?" I screamed, "How could you do this to me?" I screamed, "I thought you were dead." I screamed, "The police searched." "For you," I screamed. "I've been living in hell for 3 months," and I screamed, "Whose baby is that? Whose baby did you bring into my house?" And Marcus just stood there, taking it, taking my rage, taking my pain, and when I finally ran out of breath, finally stopped screaming, he said very quietly, in a voice full of shame and guilt, "Her name is Amara. And she's mine, Lorraine. She's my daughter." And those words, those simple words hit me like a physical blow. Hit me so hard I actually stumbled backward, had to catch myself on the arm of the couch because my legs wouldn't hold me. And I said, "What do you mean she's your daughter?" And Marcus said exactly what I said. "She's my biological daughter. I'm her father." And I said, but how, when, and he said, "I need to tell you everything. I need you to sit down. I need you to listen. Because this is going to take a while, and it's going to be painful, and you're going to hate me even more than you already do. But you deserve the truth. You deserve to know everything. So please, Lorraine, please sit down and let me explain." And I wanted to tell him to get out, wanted to throw him out, wanted to tell him I didn't want to hear his explanations, didn't care about his reasons, wanted him gone, wanted this nightmare to be over. But I also needed to know, needed to understand, needed to hear what could possibly justify what he had done. So I sat down, sat on the edge of the couch as far away from him and the baby as possible, and I said, "Talk." And Marcus sat down, in the chair across from me, not making eye contact, looking at his hands. And he started talking, started telling me a story that would destroy everything I thought I knew about him, about us, about our marriage, about the last 4 years of our life together. And he said, "Do you remember 4 years ago when I went to that surgical conference in Atlanta, the one where I was presenting on minimally invasive cardiac procedures?" And I said, "Yes, I remember." And he said, "Something happened there, something I've regretted every single day since, something I never meant to happen, something that was a terrible mistake." And I said, "What happened?" "Marcus, what did you do?" And he said, "I met someone at that conference, another surgeon. Her name was Shanice Bennett. She was from Atlanta, worked at Emory University Hospital, and we were on a panel together. We're discussing surgical techniques. We're talking after the panel about our research. And Lorraine, she understood things about my work that most people don't. She had done similar research, had similar interests, and we just connected. We really connected. And I want you to know that I never planned for anything to happen, never intended to betray you. But we went out for drinks after the conference. Sessions ended, went to dinner, talked for hours, and one thing led to another. And Lorraine, I slept with her. I cheated on you. I betrayed our marriage. I broke my vows, and I am so deeply sorry, and I sat there feeling numb, feeling like this was happening to someone else. Because this couldn't be, my Marcus couldn't be my faithful, devoted husband who was telling me he had cheated. Couldn't be real. And I said, you cheated on me 4 years ago, and you never told me. And he said, yes, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. Sorry doesn't mean anything. I know it doesn't fix what I did. But I need you to know that it was one time. One night. I ended it immediately. I told Shanice the next morning that I had made a terrible mistake, that I loved my wife, that it could never happen again, and I came home and I tried to forget about it, tried to pretend it never happened, tried to be a better husband, tried to make it up to you, without you even knowing what I had done. And I said, so for 4 years, you've been lying to me for 4 years. You've been keeping this secret for 4 years, every time you told me you loved me, every time you touched me, every time we made love. You were lying. And he said, no, Lorraine, I wasn't lying about loving you. I have always loved you. I love you more than anything. That's why I didn't tell you, because I knew it would destroy you, would destroy us, would end our marriage, and I couldn't lose. You couldn't imagine my life without you. So I kept the secret. And I'm not saying that was the right choice. I'm not saying I should have lied, but I thought I was protecting you, protecting us, protecting our marriage, and I was wrong. I know that now. I know keeping secrets is just another form of betrayal, but at the time, I thought it was the best choice. I thought it was the only choice, and I said, okay, so you cheated 4 years ago, and you kept it a secret. But Marcus, that doesn't explain the baby. That doesn't explain where you've been for 3 months. That doesn't explain any of this. And he took a deep breath and said, 8 months ago, I got a phone call from Shanice. I hadn't talked to her in 4 years, hadn't had any contact with her since that night in Atlanta, and she called me at the hospital. Said she needed to talk to me, said it was urgent, and when I called her back, she told me she was pregnant. She said the baby was mine, and I said, that's impossible. We slept together once 4 years ago. There's no way. And she said, no, Marcus, you don't understand I'm pregnant. Now, recently pregnant, and it's yours. We stayed in contact. She said we've been seeing each other for the past year, and I felt like the world had stopped, felt like I couldn't breathe, felt like this kept getting worse and worse. And I said, what do you mean? You've been seeing each other for the past year? Are you telling me the cheating wasn't just once? Wasn't just 4 years ago? Are you telling me you've been having an affair? And Marcus closed his eyes and said, yes, Lorraine, I've been having an affair for the past 1.5 years. I've been flying to Atlanta on weekends, pretending they were work trips, pretending they were conferences, pretending they were consultations. And I've been seeing Shanice, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen, never meant to hurt you, never meant to have an affair, but it happened. And I didn't know how to stop it, didn't know how to tell you, didn't know what to do. And I stood up feeling rage coursing through my body, feeling like I wanted to hurt him, wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused me. And I said, get out of my house right now, take your baby and get out, because I can't even look at you right now. I can't believe you. I can't believe any of this is real. And Marcus said, please, Lorraine, please let me finish. Please let me tell you everything, because it gets worse. It gets so much worse, and there are things you need to know. And I said, Marcus, how could it possibly get worse than finding out my husband has been having an affair for over a year, has a baby with another woman? How could it possibly be worse? And he said, because Shanice is dead. Lorraine, she died 2 weeks ago, and that's why I have Amara. That's why I brought her here, because she has no one else, because I'm all she has left. And you need to understand why I disappeared, need to understand what happened. And those words made me sit back down, because suddenly the baby, the disappearance, all of it started to make a horrible kind of sense. And I said, tell me everything. Marcus, tell me what happened. And Marcus said, when Shanice told me she was pregnant 8 months ago. I panicked, completely. Panicked because I knew this was the end. Knew this secret was going to come out. Knew I was going to lose you. Lose our marriage. Lose everything. And I begged her. I begged her to not have the baby. Offered to pay for an abortion. Offered to pay her whatever she needed. But she refused. She said she wanted this baby. Said she was going to have it with or without my support, and I didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know how to fix this. So I just sent her money, sent her thousands of dollars, took it from our savings accounts, from accounts you didn't monitor, told her I would help financially. But I couldn't be involved, couldn't be in the baby's life because I had a wife. And she agreed. She said fine, she didn't need me. She just needed financial support. And so that's what I did for those 8 months while she was pregnant. I sent her money, and I prayed you would never find out. Prayed this secret would stay, buried forever. But then he said, but then about 3.5 months ago, Shanice called me, and she was crying hysterically. And she said, Marcus, I need you. The doctors found something. They did an ultrasound and found masses on my ovaries. They did a biopsy, and it's cancer, it's ovarian cancer, and it's aggressive. It's already stage 4, and they're saying even with treatment, I might only have a few months, maybe less, and I'm terrified. Marcus, I'm so terrified, not for me, but for the baby. What's going to happen to our baby if I die? Who's going to take care of her? And I asked her, doesn't she have family? Doesn't she have parents, siblings, someone who could raise the baby? And she said no. Her parents are dead. She has a brother, but he's in prison. She has no one. Marcus, you're the only family this baby has, and if something happens to me, you have to promise me you'll take care of her. You have to promise me you'll be her father. And he said, I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do, because taking the baby meant telling you, meant confessing everything, meant ending our marriage, and I wasn't ready for that. Wasn't brave enough for that. So I told Shanice, let's not think about the worst case scenario. Let's focus on treatment, let's hope for the best. But she kept calling, kept begging me to come to Atlanta to be there for the birth, to meet my daughter. And I kept making excuses, kept saying, I couldn't leave work, couldn't leave. You couldn't explain where I was. Going, and then, 3 months ago, Shanice went into labor early at 36 weeks. And she called me from the hospital, and she was alone, completely alone, giving birth to our daughter with no one there to support her, no one to hold her hand. No. One to tell her she was going to be okay, and something broke inside me. Lorraine, something snapped, and I realized I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep pretending this baby didn't exist, couldn't keep hiding, couldn't keep lying. So I got in my car and I drove to Atlanta, and I didn't call. You didn't tell you where I was going because I was a coward, because I didn't know how to explain, because I thought maybe I could be there for the birth and then come back, and you would never know. But when I got to the hospital, when I saw Shanice, when I saw how sick she was, how weak, how terrified, I realized this wasn't just about the birth. This was about so much more. Marcus paused, wiping tears from his face, and continued, she had the baby. Amara was born on March 23rd at 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and she was perfect, Lorraine. She was absolutely perfect, and I held her for the first time, and I fell in love with her instantly, completely, irrevocably, and I knew in that moment that I couldn't leave her, couldn't abandon her, couldn't pretend she didn't exist, because she was my daughter, my flesh and blood, and she needed me. But Shanice, she was getting worse. The cancer had spread everywhere, and the doctors said she had weeks, at most, maybe a month, and she begged me, Lorraine. She grabbed my hand with what little strength she had left, and she said, Marcus, please don't leave me. Please stay with me these last few weeks. I don't want to die alone. I don't want Amara to be alone. And I'm scared. I'm so scared. And what was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to leave? How was I supposed to walk away from a dying woman and a newborn baby who had no one else? So I stayed. He said, I called the hospital where I work. Told them. I had a family emergency, told them. I needed emergency leave. And I stayed in Atlanta, and I took care of Shanice. I took her to her doctor appointments. I helped her with the baby. I watched her deteriorate day by day. Watched the cancer eat away. At her, watched her lose weight, lose strength, lose hope, and I kept telling myself I would call you, would explain, would figure out a way to tell you what was happening. But days turned into weeks, and I couldn't find the words, couldn't figure out how to explain, couldn't bear to hear your voice knowing what I had done, knowing how badly I was hurting you. And then my phone died, and I didn't charge it because I was afraid if I turned it on, I would see all your messages, all your calls, and I wouldn't be able to handle it, wouldn't be able to face what I was doing to you. So I just stayed in Atlanta in this bubble where it was just me and Shanice and Amara, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, told myself I was being there for someone who needed me, told myself that once Shanice passed, I would come home and explain everything and somehow make you understand. But he said, I didn't understand how long those weeks would feel, didn't understand what it would be like to watch someone die slowly to take care of a newborn while caring for someone in hospice, to be torn between duty and guilt, between responsibility and betrayal. And Shanice, she held on longer than the doctors thought she would. She held on for almost 3 months, fighting for every day, fighting to spend as much time with Amara as possible. And during those 3 months, I thought about you every single day, thought about what you must be going through, thought about how you must be worried sick, must be thinking I was dead, must be grieving, and the guilt was crushing, was suffocating. But I also couldn't leave, couldn't abandon Shanice in her final days, couldn't abandon this baby who was innocent in all of this, who didn't ask for any of this, who just needed someone to love her. And then 2 weeks ago, Marcus said, his voice breaking, Shanice died. She died at 3 a.m. with me holding her hand. And her last words, her very last words were, take care of our baby. Marcus, promise me you'll take care of Amara. Promise me you'll be a good father. Promise me she'll know she was loved. And I promised her, I promised a dying woman that I would raise her child, would be the father Amara deserved, would make sure she knew she was wanted, was loved. And after Shanice died, after the funeral, after dealing with all the legal paperwork to establish my paternity, to get custody of Amara, I knew I had to come home, had to face you, had to tell you everything, had to accept the consequences of my choices, even if that meant losing you. Losing our marriage, losing the only woman I've ever truly loved. And I sat there absorbing all of this, absorbing the fact that my husband had been having an affair for over a year, had gotten another woman. Pregnant, had spent 3 months caring for her while she died, had made me think he was dead or kidnapped or hurt while he was playing house with his mistress and their baby, and I felt so many emotions. All at once, I felt rage, pure, unfiltered rage. At Marcus for lying, for cheating, for abandoning me, for putting me through 3 months of hell. I felt betrayal so deep, it felt physical, felt like my chest was being ripped open, felt like I would never be whole again. I felt grief for the marriage I thought I had for the man I thought Marcus was for the 28 years that now felt like a lie. I felt confusion about how I had missed this, how I hadn't known my husband was having an affair, how I had been so blind, and I felt something else, something unexpected. When I looked at that sleeping baby, I felt curiosity, I felt a strange pull, I felt something that scared me. Because how could I feel anything but hatred for this child who was the product of my husband's betrayal and I? said to Marcus, my voice cold and hard. You expect me to forgive this. You expect me to just accept that you had an affair, that you have a child with another woman, that you let me think you were dead for 3 months. You expect me to help you raise this baby, to play stepmother to your love, child, to pretend like our marriage isn't completely destroyed. And Marcus said, no. Lorraine, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to stay. I don't expect anything from you, except maybe the chance to explain, to try to make you understand why I did what I did. Even though I know there's no justification. I know I've destroyed everything. I know I've hurt you in ways that can't be fixed, but I need you to know that I never stopped loving. You never wanted to hurt. You never meant for any of this to happen. And I said, but it did happen. Marcus, it did happen. And you chose it. You chose to cheat. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie. You chose to leave me. You chose her over me, over our marriage, over everything we built together. And now you expect me to what? Welcome you back with open arms, raise your child. Forget that you betrayed me in every possible way. And Marcus said, I don't know what I expect, Lorraine. I just know that I'm here, that I'm trying to be honest, finally, after years of lies, that I'm asking not for forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but for understanding, for compassion, for a chance to explain why I made the choices I did, even though they were terrible choices, even though they hurt you, even though they destroyed. And I wanted to throw him out, wanted to tell him to leave and never come back, wanted to file for divorce and never see him again, wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt me. But I also wanted answers, wanted to understand, wanted to know why he had done this, why he had risked everything, why he had thrown away 28 years of marriage. And I said, why, Marcus? Why did you cheat in the first place? Why did you have an affair? What was missing from our marriage? What did she give you that I didn't? And he looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said, nothing. Lorraine, she gave me nothing that you didn't give me. This wasn't about you not being enough. This wasn't about our marriage being broken. This was about me being broken, about me not dealing with my pain, about me making terrible, selfish choices because I couldn't face my own grief. And I said, what grief? What pain? What are you talking about? And Marcus said, the grief of not having children. Lorraine, the grief that I pretended I was over, that I told you I had accepted, that I said didn't matter anymore. But it did matter. It mattered so much, and I never dealt with it, never processed it, never let myself mourn properly, because I was trying to be strong, for you, trying to show you it was okay, trying to move forward, but inside I was dying. Inside I felt like a failure. Inside I felt like less of a man, because I couldn't give you children. And when I met Shanice, when she showed interest in me, when she made me feel wanted, made me feel desirable, I made a terrible choice. I sought comfort in the wrong place. I tried to fill a void that could never be filled that way, and I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying my pain justifies what I did. I'm just trying to help you understand why I made such a catastrophically bad decision. And something about that honesty, something about Marcus finally admitting that he had been struggling, made me pause, made me think back over the years, made me remember all the times I had caught him looking sad, all the times he had seemed distant, all the times I had asked what was wrong and he had said nothing, and I realized he had been lying, even then, had been hiding his pain even then, and I said, why didn't you tell me, Marcus? Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Why didn't you let me help you? And he said, because I didn't want to burden you, because you were dealing with your own grief, your own pain, and I thought I needed to be strong for you, needed to be the one who held it together. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that the pain didn't matter, that I had moved past it. But I hadn't. I had just buried it, and it festered, and it turned into something ugly, something that made me vulnerable to temptation, to making choices that destroyed everything I loved. And I sat there trying to process this, trying to understand how we had gotten here, how two people who loved each other had ended up in this place of broken trust and shattered vows and so much pain. And I said, Marcus, I need you to leave. I need you to take Amara and go somewhere else tonight because I can't be in the same house with you right now. I can't think clearly with you here. I need space. I need time. I need to figure out what I'm going to do." And he nodded, said, "I understand," said he would go to his brother's house, and he picked up the car seat and the diaper bag and started walking toward the door. And then he turned back and said, "Lorraine, I know I don't deserve to ask this. I know I have no right. But please don't make a decision tonight. Please take some time to think about everything, to process, to figure out what you want. Because whatever you decide, I'll accept it. If you want a divorce, I'll sign the papers if you never want to see me again. I'll respect that. If you want me to leave and never come back, I'll do it. But please, just take some time before you decide, because this isn't just about us anymore. This is about Amara, too. And she's innocent. She didn't choose any of this. She just needs a family. And I'm asking you, not for me, but for her to consider whether you can find it in your heart to be part of her life." And then he left, and I was alone again. But this time, instead of wondering if my husband was alive or dead, instead of living in that awful limbo, I knew the truth. I knew he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I knew he had chosen another woman. I knew he had lied for years. I knew everything. And somehow knowing was worse than not knowing, because now I had to make a choice. Had to decide whether to forgive the unforgivable, whether to try to rebuild what had been shattered, whether to walk away from 28 years of marriage, whether to become a stepmother to my husband's love. Child had to make impossible decisions with no good options, with no clear right answer. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't sleep. Could only pace around the house, thinking about everything Marcus had told. Me thinking about Shanice dying, thinking about baby Amara having no mother, thinking about my marriage lying in ruins, thinking about the choices ahead of me. And at 3 a.m, I called my sister Denise, and when she answered sounding groggy and confused, I said he came back, and she said, "What? Who came back?" And I said, "Marcus. He came back tonight," and she was instantly awake. Said, "Oh my God, Lorraine, is he okay? What happened? Where has he been?" And I said, "He's been in Atlanta, taking care of his dying mistress and their baby." And there was complete silence on the other end of the line. And then Denise said, "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" And I told her everything, told her about the affair, about Shanice, about the baby, about Marcus. Staying with them for 3 months, about Shanice dying, about Marcus bringing Amara home. And when I finished, Denise was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Lorraine, that man has lost his mind if he thinks you're going to accept this, if he thinks you're going to just forgive him and raise his love child. He has absolutely lost his mind." And I said, I know it's insane. I know I should divorce him. I know I should never speak to him again. I know that. But Denise, there's a baby, an innocent baby, who just lost her mother, who has no other family, who needs someone. And I can't stop thinking about her. Can't stop thinking about the fact that I always wanted to be a mother, and here's a child who needs a mother, even though she came in the worst possible way. And Denise said, "Lorraine, you cannot be serious. You cannot possibly be considering staying with him, considering raising that baby. You understand what that would mean, right? That would mean forgiving him for an affair, for getting another woman pregnant, for lying to you for years, for abandoning you for 3 months. That would mean looking at that baby every single day and being reminded of his betrayal. That would mean rebuilding a marriage that has been completely destroyed. How could you even consider that?" And I said, "I don't know, Denise. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I can raise that baby. I don't know anything right now except that my life has been turned upside down, and I have to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of my life, and I'm terrified. I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. I'm terrified of staying and being miserable. I'm terrified of leaving and regretting it. I'm terrified of everything." And Denise said, Okay, I understand this is overwhelming. This is huge. But Lorraine, you need to think about yourself. You need to think about what you want, what you need, not what Marcus wants. Not what that baby needs, but what you need. What would make you happy, what you can live with. Because whatever you decide, you're the one who has to live with that decision every single day for the rest of your life. And that question, that simple question, what would make me happy, stopped me. Because I realized I didn't know what I wanted, didn't know what would make me happy, didn't know if I even believed happiness was possible anymore after everything that had happened. And I said, I don't know, Denise. I don't know what I want. And she said, then take some time. Figure it out. Don't make any decisions right now. Don't tell Marcus you'll stay. Don't tell him you'll leave. Just tell him you need time and use that time to really think about what you want, about what you can forgive, about what you can live with, and then make a decision from a place of clarity, not from a place of shock and pain and confusion. So that's what I did the next morning when Marcus called asking if he could come over. I said yes, but when he arrived with Amara, I told him we needed to establish some ground rules. I said, you can stay in the house, but you're sleeping in the guest room. We are not sharing a bed. We are not acting like everything is fine. I said, I don't know if I'm going to stay. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know what our future looks like, but I need time to process, to think, to figure out what I want. I said, you need to be completely honest with me from now on. No more secrets, no more lies. If I ask you something, you tell me the truth, even if you think it will hurt me, even if you're afraid of my reaction. Complete honesty, or this is over. Immediately, and Marcus agreed to all of it, said he would do whatever I needed, whatever would help me heal, whatever would give us a chance. And so began the strangest, most difficult period of my life. We were living in the same house, but like roommates, not like husband and wife. We were co-parenting Amara, but I hadn't decided whether I was actually going to be her mother or if I was just helping temporarily until I made my decision. And Marcus, he threw himself into taking care of Amara. Did all. The feedings, all the diaper changes, all the night wake-ups, all the hard parts of infant care, and I watched him, with her watched him be gentle and patient and loving, and I saw a side of Marcus I had never seen before, saw him as a father, and it was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once, because this was what we had wanted for so many years. This was the dream we had chased through fertility treatments and miscarriages and disappointment. And now, here it was. But in the most painful way possible, and slowly, very slowly, I found myself drawn to Amara. Found myself wanting to hold her, wanting to feed her, wanting to be the one who comforted her when she cried. And the first time I held her, really held her. Not just that first night, but held her when I was alone, when Marcus wasn't watching. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes that were so much like Marcus's eyes, and something inside me softened, something inside me opened, and I felt a connection, felt a pull, felt something that might have been the beginning of love. And it terrified me. Terrified me, because loving this baby felt like betraying myself, felt like accepting Marcus's betrayal, felt like letting him off the hook, but I couldn't help it, couldn't stop myself. From caring about this tiny, innocent person who didn't ask to be born, who didn't ask for any of this, who just needed love and safety and someone to care for her. And one night, about 2 weeks after Marcus came home, I was giving Amara a bottle at 2 a.m. Marcus had done the previous 2 night feedings, and I had told him to sleep, told him I would take this one. And as I sat there in the dim light of the living room, watching Amara eat, watching her little hand grip my finger, started crying, started really crying for the first time since Marcus had come home. And I cried for everything. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the trust that had been shattered. I cried for the pain of betrayal. I cried for Shanice, who had died so young, leaving her baby behind. I cried for the years Marcus and I had spent trying to have a child, only to have him have one with someone else. I cried for the injustice of it all, and I cried because despite everything, despite the pain, despite the betrayal, despite all the reasons I should walk away, I was falling in love with this baby, was feeling my heart open to her in ways I hadn't expected, in ways that made everything so much more complicated. And Marcus found me, there crying while holding Amara. And he sat down next to me, and he said, "Lorraine, what's wrong? What can I do?" And I said, "I don't know what to do. Marcus, I don't know how to forgive you. I don't know how to move past this, but I also don't know how to walk away from her. I don't know how to leave this baby, who I'm already starting to love, and I hate that. I love her. Hate that you've put me in this position where I have to choose between my pride and my heart, between what I should do and what I want to do." And he said, "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for putting you in this impossible position." And I said, "Sorry isn't enough. Marcus, sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo the affair. Doesn't bring back the 3 months you were gone. Doesn't erase the lies." And he said, "I know it doesn't. I know nothing I say can make this better. But I need you to know that if you decide to stay, if you decide to give me another chance, if you decide to be Amara's mother, I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of your forgiveness, proving that I can be the husband you deserve, proving that I will never hurt you like this again." And I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he would never betray me again, wanted to have faith that we could rebuild, but I didn't know if I could. Didn't know if trust could be rebuilt once it was shattered. Didn't know if I was strong enough to do the work that would be required to save our marriage. So I said, "Marcus, I need you to understand something. If I stay," and that's still a big if I stay, it's going to be different. I'm not the same person I was before you left. I'm not going to trust you blindly. I'm not going to assume. You're telling me the truth. I'm going to question you. I'm going to need proof. I'm going to need transparency in everything you do. And that might feel suffocating. That might feel like I don't trust you. And the truth is, I don't trust you not anymore. You destroyed that trust. And if we're going to rebuild it, you're going to have to earn it back slowly, painfully, day by day. And there are going to be days when I'm angry, when I resent you, when I look at you and only see your betrayal. And you're going to have to accept that you're going to have to be patient with my anger, with my pain, with my inability to just move on. And if you can't do that, if you can't handle that, then we should end this now. Because I can't go through the process of rebuilding only to have you give up when it gets hard. And Marcus said, "I can do that. I will do that. I will be as patient as you need me to be, as transparent as you need me to be, as understanding as you need me to be. Because, Lorraine, I don't want to lose you. I know I've already lost your trust. I've already damaged our marriage, but I haven't lost you yet. And as long as there's a chance, as long as you're willing to try, I'm going to do everything in my power to make this work and over." The next few weeks, I watched Marcus prove that he meant what he said. He quit his job at Detroit. General took a position at a smaller clinic with better hours, so he could be home more, be present more, be available for me and for Amara. He gave me access to everything. His phone, his email, his bank accounts, his location, his entire life became an open book. And at first it felt intrusive, felt like I was spying on him, felt wrong. But Marcus insisted, said he had nothing to hide, said he wanted me to be able to check anything, anytime, said transparency was the only way to rebuild trust. And he started therapy, both individual therapy to deal with his grief and his guilt, and couples therapy with me, where we talked about everything, talked about the affair, talked about his choices, talked about my pain, talked about how to move forward. And it was hard. God, it was so hard sitting in that therapist's office week after week, digging into the wounds, digging into the betrayal, digging into all the pain. But it was also necessary, was also healing, was also the only way to have any chance of saving our marriage. And slowly, very slowly, things began to shift, began to change. I began to see that Marcus really was remorseful, really did understand the magnitude of what he had done, really was committed to making things right. And I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could survive this. Maybe love really could overcome even massive betrayal. Maybe our marriage could be rebuilt into something, even stronger than it was before. And I fell in love with Amara, completely, irrevocably, head over heels in love. By the time she was 6 months old, I couldn't imagine my life without her. Couldn't imagine not being her mother. Couldn't imagine walking away. And I realized that love isn't about biology, isn't about how a child comes into your life. It's about showing up. It's about being there. It's about choosing every single day to love this person who depends on you. And I chose Amara. I chose to be her mother, not because I had to, not because Marcus asked me to, but because I wanted to, because she had become mine in every way that mattered. And watching Marcus with her, watching him be a father, watching him be gentle and patient and loving, helped me remember why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. Helped me see past the betrayal to the good man underneath the man who had made terrible mistakes, but who was trying desperately to be better. And one night, almost a year after Marcus came home, we were lying in bed in our bed because somewhere along the way, I had let him move back into our bedroom, had let him back into my space, back into my life. And I said, Marcus, I need to tell you something. And he tensed, said, okay, what is it? And I said, I've decided I'm staying. I'm not leaving you. I'm not getting a divorce. I'm choosing to forgive you. I'm choosing to rebuild our marriage. I'm choosing to be Amara's mother, not because you deserve it. Because honestly, Marcus, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve my forgiveness. You don't deserve another chance, but I'm giving it to you anyway. Because I love you. Because I love Amara. Because I believe people can change. Because I believe our marriage is worth fighting for. And Marcus started crying, pulled me close and said, thank you, Lorraine. Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. I know you could have left. I know most people would have left, but you stayed. You chose to forgive. You chose to rebuild. And I promise you, I swear to you, I will never betray your trust again. I will never hurt you like that again. I will spend the rest of my life being the husband you deserve, being the father Amara deserves, being worthy of the grace you've shown me. And I said, Marcus, I need you to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, doesn't mean the pain is gone, doesn't mean everything is fine. I'm choosing to forgive you, but there are still going to be hard days, still going to be moments when I'm angry, when I resent you, when I wonder if I made the right choice, and you have to be okay with that. Have to understand that healing isn't linear, isn't quick, isn't easy. And he said, I understand. And I accept that. And I'm grateful, grateful that you're willing to try. Grateful that you're giving us a chance. Grateful that Amara has you as her mother. And now, 3 years later, Amara is 3.5 years old, and she is the light of my life. She calls me Mama. She runs to me when she's scared. She tells me she loves me every night before bed. She is mine in every way that matters. And yes, sometimes I look at her and see Marcus and remember the betrayal, remember the affair, remember the pain, but mostly I just see her. See this beautiful, funny, smart little girl who I love more than I ever thought possible. And yes, our marriage is different than it was before. There's less naive trust, less assumption that everything is fine, more communication, more honesty, more work. But it's also deeper, more real, more resilient, because we've been through the fire and come out on the other side, and we know we can survive anything. We know we can rebuild. We know that love, when it's real, when it's fought for, when it's earned, is stronger than any betrayal. My husband vanished for 3 months and came back with a baby that wasn't mine. And that should have been the end of our story. Should have been the moment I walked away. Should have been the betrayal that destroyed us. But instead, it became our new beginning. Became the moment we learned what real love looks like. Became the catalyst that forced us to deal with pain we had been avoiding for years. Became the way we finally became parents, even though it was in the most painful way possible. And I'm not going to lie and say it was easy, or that I never had doubts, or that there weren't moments when I wanted to give up. Because there were so many moments when I questioned my decision. So many nights when I lay awake wondering if I was being stupid, if I was being a doormat, if I should have had more self-respect. But then I would look at Amara, would see her sleeping, peacefully, would see her smile, would hear her laugh, and I would know that staying was the right choice. Not because Marcus deserved it, but because Amara deserved a mother, deserved a stable family, deserved love, and I was capable of giving her that. And maybe that makes me weak, maybe that makes me a fool. Maybe there are people watching this who think I should have left, who think forgiving infidelity is unacceptable, who think I betrayed myself by staying, and that's okay. That's their opinion. They're entitled to it. But I know what's true. For me, I know that I made the best decision I could make with the information I had. I know that I chose love over anger, chose forgiveness over resentment, chose family over pride. And yes, it was hard. Yes, it hurt. Yes, there were costs, but there were also rewards. And the rewards, the love I have with Amara, the marriage. Marcus and I have rebuilt the family. We've become those rewards. Outweigh the costs, outweigh the pain, outweigh everything. So if you're watching this, if you've been betrayed, if your partner has done something you thought was unforgivable, if you're trying to decide whether to stay or go, I can't tell you what to do, because every situation is different. Every betrayal is unique. Every person has different limits, different capacities for forgiveness. But I can tell you that forgiveness is possible, that rebuilding is possible, that love can survive even massive betrayals, if both people are willing to do the work, if both people are committed to change, if both people choose each other every day, even when it's hard. And I can tell you that sometimes the family you get isn't the family you planned, isn't the family you imagined, but it can still be a real family, can still be a beautiful family, can still be exactly what you needed, even if you didn't know it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. And if it resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, if you're trying to decide whether to forgive, please share your story in the comments. Because these stories matter. Because sharing them helps others. Helps people see they're not alone. Helps people understand that there's no one right answer, that everyone's journey is different. And if this story helped you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, share it with someone who might need to hear it, because we need more stories about forgiveness, more stories about grace, more stories about families that are built, not born, more stories about love that survives. And remember, your story is still being written, and whatever you choose, whether you stay or go, whether you forgive or move on, is valid, is okay, is yours.